Hello. Do you like power? Do you like the power to influence others? When we feel we have power over somebody else, we cease to notice or listen to them, only ourselves. All that matters is a sense of grandiosity, of being on top and in charge. Have you noticed that amongst others, politicians are always right and have the difficulty in apologising, and therefore unable and unwilling to make themselves just a wee bit vulnerable? And don't we have some supreme examples around in our political life at the moment, not forgetting ourselves? Indeed, what a display of power we witness in Parliament during Prime Minister question times and in the innumerable interviews that follow. Powerful speeches by presidents and politicians of all persuasions across the globe. Exercising power over others can make us feel good, invincible, and confident beyond questioning. The news about the former Prince Andrew and Epstein seriously questions the abuse of power. But also, the exercise of power can make us feel good, helpful, compassionate, and of service to others by influencing others for good. So let's reflect for a moment on this issue of power, and particularly let's actually think for a moment of the power exercised by Pilate, the Roman governor, when faced with Jesus when he was brought before him. So when Jesus comes before Pontius Pilate, he is a Roman governor, and therefore the emperor's chief man in Judea, who hears that there is a man outside the palace who is claiming, some say, to be a king. One can only imagine that Pilate feels supremely confident in the exercise of power, excuse me, over all his subjects. For such power has been given to him by the emperor. However, there are no red carpets, no guards of honours, nor a flourish of trumpets. But what Pilate rather sees is a vulnerable, blood-stained, dishevelled peasant, much the worse for wear, having been pushed and shoved across the city at night by the police. What a familiar story. He does not present as a king, which Pilate, I'm sure, found confusing. When Jesus is on the cross, one of the Roman soldiers taunts him, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." Then one of the criminals, who you remember were crucified either side of him, taunts him, while the other deftly reaches out to the figure of Jesus and says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." To which he receives the assurance, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." The kingdom is here with the presence of this man Jesus. Look no further. Many have interpreted these words of Jesus as a promise solely of a world to come, far beyond this one. And that kingdom which he speaks of is a purely spiritual kingdom. Well, you can hear the pleading. Not much use, says the poor, the marginalized, the drug addict, the exploited young woman, and the hardened criminal. What good is that to me? So you have to ask, how might this kingdom affect me now? And how are we to interpret these ancient words of Jesus? He says some strange things, doesn't he? My kingdom is not from this world. And I think what he's saying is these words are not so much about where my kingdom is, where the kingdom of Jesus is, but about what kind of kingdom it is and what is the source of its power. Yeah, Jesus' kingdom is spiritual, but it's also down here among us, infiltrating the kingdoms of the world. Pilate's power, you see, comes from the emperor, and his power comes ultimately from the soldiers he can command. Jesus commands no troops. He only has followers. Those, as he puts it, belong to the truth and listen to his voice. Strange, isn't it? He stands in a long line of those whom the world might have considered vulnerable and foolish. And so, in the end, God sends his son, whom Paul in Philippians tells he humbled himself, he emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant. This is reckless, writ large indeed, the foolishness of God. It's not actually very fashionable these days to be associated with fools, is it? Raw power then can seduce the best of us. We must be aware of using our position, our job, our status, our friendships with those who are more fragile and vulnerable than ourselves, excuse me, as we exercise our personal power. How often do we hear, and maybe you have been bullied at work, been harassed, have been exploited? The kingdom of God is not from this world. That is, modeled on power which dominates. This is the kind of power very often we see in politics, in wars, commerce, financial institutions, and indeed, sadly, in families. It is the power of Jesus is a different kind. It's built from a place in which you know what it's like to be excluded, an outsider, a victim. That's not a very comfortable thought, is it? Because we all like to think we're on the inside. Finally, then, Jesus is our example of good transforming power, where the poor and the exploited and the dispossessed are protected as opposed to protecting oneself. So, how we exercise our power is worth a few moments reflection, don't you think?